Welcome to Masterminds, where we invite industry leaders to share valuable insights on scaling a business. I'm Sandesh Banger, your host, and today our guest is Mr. Siddharth Deshmukh. Siddharth is more popularly known as a traveling professor, a first batch MICA alumnus, and the founder of Fable Lab, where Siddharth helps brands and businesses unlock growth using stories. Siddharth is based in UK and has spent more than 3 decades across leadership roles in digital, entertainment, telecom, and consulting, working with organizations like Sony Entertainment, AT&T, and Cohesia UK. He also has another side which is academic. Yes, he is also a professor. He has served as the associate dean at MICA and has been teaching into multiple universities, including Southampton University, SP Jain, Symbiosis, and many more. He's also an author of multiple books like The Map That Matters, The Gift of the Gap, Not a Self Help Book, and Not a Marketing Book. He also shares his ideas through LinkedIn and YouTube. So, welcome Siddharth to Masterminds.
Thank you, Sandesh. Very glad that you've connected, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Great. And I'm just hoping to deep dive into narratives and understanding how they can scale business. So let's begin.
Yes.
So for someone who is new to your work, I would like to first understand what do we mean by story-led growth? I mean, how does it impact a business?
No, so it's a good way to begin this conversation. I think most times people conflate growth with anything but a story, because what tends to happen is that business growth happens because you're looking at it as if it's a math problem. So it's more than a math problem, it's a belief problem, right? And belief doesn't come from numbers, it comes from from something completely internal. So story led growth is essentially narrative architecture. So when I'm designing a narrative which is helping your company align towards whatever your north star is, whatever your goal is, that is when it becomes strategic. So story-led growth helps in all business outcomes, whether they are with internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, and it goes beyond marketing as well.
Will you be able to share some examples that will help understand how is strategic lever?
Yeah. So if I look at the way in which marketing comes in the whole life cycle, right? It comes after maybe your product is built, your strategy is driven correctly, your vision is sorted, and the rest of it, and then marketing is sprinkled on top, whether tactically or strategically. Now, marketing as a function is important, but the fact is, story is your strategy in action. So it comes way before, because it connects to the founder's vision, it connects to various stakeholders and their behavior, it connects to the way in which your communication is to the outside world, which goes into product. It goes into the way in which your ability to shape your narrative either pleases investors or it doesn't. So it's a lot of stuff which normal typical marketing doesn't.
Right. So I remember in one of our brief conversation, you were mentioning about Swiggy versus Zomato
Yeah.
and how Zomato's narrative is far more stronger. Will you be
Yeah.
able to give us a deep dive into that so that
So
our
yeah, absolutely. So if you look at both of these, they're very similar, right? So it's a good example to take. So if you look at Swiggy and Zomato, both are in the same category. Both are competitors with each other. Both listed in the market at around the same time. What tended to happen was that one grew at a multiple of maybe 2x or something like that, and the other like really shot up, right? Which is Zomato. And I think the difference between the two, because it's such a comparable case study, is that one was believing itself to be a feature provider, a functional provider, a feature provider, and the other was actually invested in its narrative. And I think that when you're investing in your narrative, what tends to happen is that it scales up your multiple when it comes to growth. So I think those are the levers that Zomato used, which Swiggy didn't use.
so is it something connected to the element that stories help you humanize your connection with your customers? Is it something like that? Are you trying to convey through this example?
I think that the stories go beyond features, right? Stories connect to meaning. Now, meaning making is essentially and deeply human. So, whether we are looking at a B2B or a B2C scenario, eventually it's one human talking to the other. Normally, what what tends to happen is that unless and until your company or yourself are not invested in meaning making, you're going to fall short in creating an impact on the world. So you may have the best vision in the world, you may have your business model canvas sorted out, you may have a lot of other things, including your marketing, sorted out. But unless and until you pass the water cooler test, it's not going to work. Let me explain what the water cooler test is. So if imagine two employees within a company actually talking at the water cooler, if they are actually talking to each other and they're saying the same things when it comes to actually what their company represents, that is a very, very strong indicator that there is common meaning, which is going beyond just the founder's vision or the CEO's vision and has percolated across, at least internally. Is this making sense?
Yes. So the narratives also built internally.
Yes.
And there has to be some alignment between what is the narrative internally versus what you communicate to your customers or stakeholders.
Yes, absolutely. Because that is exactly the difference that storytelling brings to the table. Because if you look at it, storytelling is not only about parroting the company line, right? It's not parroting a tagline that your marketing campaign is saying. It goes way beyond that. It is internalizing the meaning. It is actually having a cohesive stance to the world. It is actually showcasing the way in which your narrative can impact. It is the difference that you can bring to the table. It goes beyond your product, it goes beyond your service. You actually stand for a shift, you actually stand for a movement, you are actually talking about how you see the future. And all of these threads can connect back to a single origin story, then that can be actually taken across various stakeholders.
And since you mentioned business model canvas, so within scaling up framework, we have a strategic tool called Seven Strata. These are the 7 elements of your strategy. And the
Mhm.
first and most foundational is knowing your core customer. So what do you think, and how important is knowing your customer in this entire narrative business?
I think, first of all, the customers are people. So, and as human beings, we are always invested in co-creating stories. So, if you imagine your own ancestors sitting across, each other in sub-Saharan Africa when there's a hot, warm fire going on, and your belly is full, and you're hearing a village elder tell a story, you're still connecting to people as people. Customers are part of people, right? So people is the higher truth over here. And if I look at the way in which customers themselves are, if I have to go deeper, I think we are getting so much data about customers and how they change because of contexts. So essentially, when you're looking at contexts changing human beings, you're looking at different personas across different, different platforms, which essentially means that your storytelling, your narrative has to ring true to the platform, to the customer, to the algorithm, so many different things, isn't it? So it goes beyond the typical customer segment and customer relationship that a business model canvas goes. It's a good starting point, the business model canvas, but to convert it into action, eventually you have to convert behavioral change, whether it's for internal or external stakeholders. And storytelling kind of unlocks those levers inside somebody's brain.
So, storytelling is one aspect, but storytelling can't be just a communication tool. It has
No,
to
it's
lead
not.
to changes internally as well as externally. So, how do organizations do that? Any example, maybe if you can give?
I mean, many examples we can take, but let's look at the structure first.
Mhm.
Where does it actually happen? So when you're looking at storytelling, it is conversion of the vision that you have into a narrative architecture, right? It's the conversion of a vision into a narrative architecture. And a lot of times storytelling actually begins with the mind. Most people think of storytelling as a skill which is external, right? Okay, I need to use this format, I need to use this tone of voice, I need to use this, and that's very important, but that's still step 3, right? Not even step 2. I think step 1 is sorting your own head out in terms of your own origin story, the way in which your belief system is, the way in which your values are, the way in which it is compelling for you. What problem are you itching to solve, and the rest of it. What I've noticed in the work that I do is that most people find this very useful. In fact, all people find this very useful because once that happens, you have to tell yourself your own story really well first before you can communicate it to your team or your external parties. And that is the core difference in the structural thing. Then comes your format, then comes your voice, then comes what you're trying to achieve through your story and the rest of it. Now, if I have to look at examples of people who have done it, you can take B2C examples or B2B examples. So if I look at B2B examples, let's start with B2C. If you have to sell water, right? If you have to sell water as a category thing, it's a very commoditized product. And storytelling changes the way in which you move it in a rapidly commoditizing world because you are investing it with meaning. So a great example of that would be Liquid Death, because what you're doing with Liquid Death is that it's a water brand, but it's selling at a premium, and it is making sure that you understand that the meaning that you're doing is that you're essentially murdering with water, right? So essentially you're standing against all the colas of the world, all the other beverages of the world, and you're investing that meaning which the person has already subscribed to, right? Because you're connecting to a persona within the context, and then you're communicating that. So I think Liquid Death is a great example for B2C. You can look at Tesla, which is making you believe in sustainable energy, or you can look at Airbnb, which is creating a movement which goes beyond just living outside, but you're soaking yourself in the culture. If I look at B2B, right, that's where it becomes different, because there's a difference. I mean, the story narrative structure remains the same, but if I look at the way in which B2C starts, it starts with individualism, and it starts emotionally. In B2B, you're looking for safety, you're looking for solidity, you're looking as if it's one tribe selling to the other tribe. So you're representing not just you, but your boss, your peers, your underlings, whatever it may be, to the other side, which is also doing the same. So if I look at B2B, a lot of the examples, great examples of storytelling go below the radar, because, we don't see them celebrated as B2C examples. But if I still have to select B2B, I'd go for, let's say, the way in which Maersk has done its work. So it went from a pure shipbuilding company to something which is like around ensuring that they're reducing complexity of the whole thing. So that is big meaning. If I look at Caterpillar, it also moved from features and functions to something else. If I look at HubSpot, it has moved from just features and functions into meaning making about the way in which it is communicating itself. If I look at let's say Slack, right? So if I look at Slack, it is saying get out of your inbox. It's not saying anything which is like I have this cool feature or I have this cool function. Does that make sense?
True. So it's less of features, but more of a purpose that the business is serving. I think somewhere this narrative is linked to that, the purpose and the larger vision. And I think that's what you were also talking about. I will just take an example of Domino's, and one of the core brand promise of Domino's in the past has been 30 minutes of free.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, where is the narrative here? So I think that will help me distill this concept further.
No, it's fantastic example. So if I look at Domino's, right, if that is the message, but what's the residue that Domino's leaves behind? So if the message is 30 minutes free, the residue is certainty. So the narrative is about certainty. The way in which they're communicating it through their marketing campaign, which is very good, which is around 30-minute delivery. So they're talking about a capability, but what's remaining behind in your head is a meaning that, okay, if I order, I can be certain that I'll be fed in 31 minutes or something like that. So I think that's the core difference that I see.
Correct. And in fact, they have gone a level ahead and said, it's not 30 minutes, it is free. So that's the
Which is
guarantee.
which is again certainty, isn't it?
Correct. We also have a concept called words you own. So what words do you own in the minds of your customer?
Mm. Mm.
Do you think this is somewhat related to the narrative? Is it an extension of that concept per se? For
Absolutely.
example, Xerox. Xerox itself is a word owned in the mind of people when it comes to photocopying. So it owns photocopy.
Yeah. So I think storytelling takes it again a couple of levels deeper.
Mhm.
What this Imagine the number of words you're saying no to, right? Because when you're invested in your own story and when you're co-creating the story with your consumers, you're also saying no to so many different stories. Yes, right? So the whole thing stems from there. I would say that if I'm looking at storytelling as the engine of making your offering distinctive, then it has to go beyond just a tagline. So you can have all the cleverest taglines in the world, right, which are devised by your one word and two word wordsmiths. But does your frontline employee actually believe that? Right? Do people on the other side of the fence, do your investors, do your customers, do your prospects actually believe that? Do they believe your tagline, or do they believe the tagline in action? Now, storytelling actually helps you delve deeper into the deeper recesses of your subconscious mind to make sure that it doesn't remain just on paper.
Siddharth, If, for example, the founder of a company says we don't have a story and we have to now get into narrative, building a narrative for our customers, for our stakeholders. So where should they start? I mean, what is the process for that?
So if
What
they
do you
say
think?
we don't have a story, I would say you just haven't found it yet. Right. So I would spend time with the founder or the founding team trying to understand their minds, because that's where it starts first. I'm not going to say, okay, show me your marketing, let me develop this. And here are three clever ways in which you can, because that is the way in which the world is operating. And that is creating more and more clutter rather than clarity. So I would like to achieve that clarity with the founder and founding team, to discover their story with them, and then to see how we can co-create the same story with all the stakeholders. That's usually the starting point.
And once you have a story or a narrative, how do you find out whether it's strong, weak, whether it's working, not working?
I think the critical aspect is you have to do that whole competitor test. Maybe if you ask people, can you tell me the thing? How does Swiggy differ from Zomato? How does Airbnb differ from Taj Hotels? And you're able to actually describe it very distinctive way. Then you have definitely won. Maybe I'll just see your sales team in action and see whether they are believing what they're saying when they parrot the line, right? So that's another way. The third thing could be, imagine your customer saying, yeah, ye lo ya wo lo, yeah, it really doesn't matter, you can choose anything. So you can do a lot of marketing, you can do a lot of tactical stuff, you can do a lot of performance marketing, but unless and until there is a deep narrative that connects to unlocking levers within your head, it's going to work at a very superficial level.
And what kind of metrics, for example, if you want to set to see the success that will be
Yeah.
measurable?
No, absolutely. One of them, I mean, if you're talking to the investor class and if you're going for IPO, right, then clearly the metric is, okay, what is my multiple? What is my multiple, and what should it be? If I'm looking at, let's say, understanding how I'm winning over competitors, there are many ways in which you can do research, and wherein you can understand the way in which people associate some meaning, like you said, Xerox, and the way in which it has meaning. So it really depends upon your marketing objective as to what you're trying to measure, and storytelling has an impact across all business objectives. So you have to understand what the business objective is first, and then say, okay, this is where I'm trying to understand whether storytelling is making a difference or not, or whether my current story is working or not.
Because you were talking about IPO, and I remember going through one of your video, and
Yeah.
in that you mentioned that public markets usually they don't reward execution alone, and they reward belief or your narrative. So how do you build a belief which is very credible and not just a hype? Because IPO, after all, many a times we say it's a hype.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that what we have to understand is that whatever meaning which we are trying to create has to lodge very clearly as a distinctive patch in your limbic system and your reptilian brain and your prefrontal cortex. Right now, these are your logical systems and your emotional systems and your absolutely ancient systems in your head. The way in which you do this is by making sure that the belief comes from a deeper place. The belief comes from your subconscious. Now, if I ask you, right, if I ask you, imagine an elephant right now in your mind's eye, and then imagine a mahout on top of the elephant, right? And if I ask you who's in charge, okay, your answer will be, okay, I think the mahout is in charge, unless and until the elephant is drunk or is in mating season. Now, the weird piece is that if you just replace the word mahout with your conscious mind, and if you replace the word elephant with your subconscious mind, we actually see what is happening. It is very contextual, and your story has to be flexible enough to be contextual. It has to be rational when it has to sound rational. It has to sound hypnotic when it's supposed to be hypnotic. So I think that it's really critical for us to understand all the many layers that storytelling brings to the table.
So, what will be the timeline? For example, a company that wants to go for an IPO and they have not found their own story and they now want to have a narrative, a storytelling. What timeline do you think this will take?
See, no, uh, for 6 months or 4 to 6 months, you can't really do any kind of marketing, active marketing. The red herring thing doesn't allow you to do that. So if you're going IPO in 1 or 2 years, your time to start is now. Because what tends to happen is that the initial workshops that I normally do, wherein you're sorting your own story in your own head, will will take about a week or so, right? Maybe a weekend of a workshop with a mentor like me, and then actually sorting it out in your own head accepting and believing it yourself, and understanding, yes, this is my truth. Then you get into the execution of it with your team and with everybody else. So that includes a series of more work internally and externally. Then it says, okay, now I'm trying to build this community, or this is what I'm trying to communicate, and then you have a content calendar of sorts. So that's typically, you might say, I want to have a media product. Like this particular podcast is a media product for success alchemists, right? So you might decide, okay, we'll need a podcast, or we'll need an Instagram page, or whatever it may be, right? Or a newsletter. So those are the outcomes. Those are the outcomes based from that. And it takes sustained effort and action and consistency to do that. I would suspect between 6 months to a year is a good time frame.
Okay. And to discover the story, is this something that comes from the founder, or is
Yeah, so to discover the story, it takes obviously for you to talk with the founder and founding team, or the CEO, or whatever the case may be, depending upon the life cycle of the company. Now, discovering is surprisingly easy because most people know it somewhere, and they're trying to articulate it, but they're doing not a very good job of it. And normally, what tends to happen is that the discovery period completes within, let's say, even 2 or 3 days, right? With a skilled mentor, of course. Then what tends to happen after that is the ability to translate that into behavioral terms and execution terms for internal teams, right? So that's a series of workshops. And then the belief and going beyond the tagline and all of those things start working. And then your external communication starts.
I also remember that you mentioned about telling 4 stories simultaneously to your investors, to the analysts.
And no, it's the challenge. The challenge is you're trying. I'm not saying tell 4 stories to the same guy, but I'm saying that you have to manage. You have to have such a strong initial story that it can spun into different narratives, or you need to have a very strong initial narrative that can be spun into stories for investors, for for customers, for prospects, for employees, and the rest of it. So it's a unified narrative which can lend itself to different storytelling.
And do you think this can be also a moat and an advantage, competitive advantage for a
Yeah,
business? Can be used like
yeah,
that?
yeah. Listen, I think it's probably the only sustainable advantages that you have in today's day and age, right? Because with the AI driving things, everything is becoming rapidly commoditized. So then, what is actually making you distinctive? What is actually making you differentiated? Which can last? Is the meaning that you occupy in your customer, prospect, investor's head? And how is that meaning created? That meaning is created through storytelling, through narrative architecture.
Can you share some insights from maybe one of your books that can also be valuable when it comes to scaling a business?
Okay, so I think scaling a business requires a lot of the kind of work that you guys are doing, right? So which is absolutely required and is fundamental, right? I think from my perspective, if I have to scale up a business, I have to, and if let's use the words product market fit or founder market fit or content market fit or whatever you want to call it. I think the aspect is to approach marketing not as an afterthought or storytelling not as an afterthought, right? It is to approach storytelling with founder market fit rather than wait till you find product market fit and then say, okay, how do we communicate? You have to flip the process. You have to bring it up front. And I think that clearly makes the difference between growth and just average sort of results. The second thing I would say is that I don't think most people understand it, but we spoke about the message and the residue for a bit. So if I say I am honest to you 5 times, let's go for it, right? I am honest, 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 right? What remains behind in your head is what a liar this man is. Why is he lying to me? Right? Not that I am honest. But if I tell you that, listen, I'm finding it very difficult to be honest. You have to lie in society. You have to, because you're lying to your kids, you have to protect feelings, etc. Then you'll say, Are, this person seems sincere and truthful. So there is a clear cut difference in message and residue. And I think the critical aspect of storytelling is that it creates the residue. It doesn't focus on the message, but it focuses on the residue.
Amazing and a great thought, I would say. And maybe one of my takeaway from today's session. I also want to ask you. So I was going through your YouTube channel, and I came across one of the video where you said the time today is possibly to move from, say, influencers to employees, using employees or having employees as your influencers.
Yeah.
Can you maybe give us more insights about what this thought is?
Yeah, I think most people look at the whole influencer marketing thing from a numeric perspective. How much reach is this influencer going to give me? And what's his follower count or her follower count, and the rest of it. I think that is looking at it completely wrong. Sure, reach matters and all of that matters, but what matters is the quality of attention that they're getting. So if I look at any influencer, whether it's a micro, nano, mega influencer, you're looking at the quality of attention that they're getting. Now, who better than your employees who are also able to communicate, to build that trust, to build that belief if they are sold on your story, right? So your employees have to be part of the mix. I'm not saying replace influencers, okay? Also select influencers wisely based upon qualitative measures that I've spoken about. But your employees are essentially trust builders, belief builders, and they're the ones who, come on, you will say, when you're talking of success alchemists as a partner, or success alchemists as somebody who's an influencer, right, who's been hired by success alchemists, who am I going to believe? I'm going to believe you, Sandesh, right? Because you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and you're making sure that you're actually saying what you believe in, and it reflects in your energy, it reflects in your tone of voice, it reflects in everything that you do, and so it just makes the biggest difference.
I think employees, if they start communicating and using the same narrative that's finally there for the company, I think that could have far more wider reach than just having or relying on
Just
influencers.
making them memorize a script or a tagline. You have to believe. See, you understand that this person really believes, right? That comes from a very deep place.
So, Siddharth, I have some rapid fires also for you.
Let's go.
What we do is I'm going to ask you a question and you have to answer it in a word or a sentence max, and
Okay.
whatever comes to your mind first.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. So the first one, what's your favorite narrative or a brand or a company for that matter?
The Mahabharata is my favorite narrative.
Where is the most underrated place where you can find a narrative?
The most underrated place that you can find a narrative. Okay. I think in sports, just think about it. Sports, right? The IPL semi-final is just finished. We are all part of a narrative. And it's absolutely underrated. Not IPL. I mean, India match happened recently, or the semi-final. Yeah, the World Cup. But even if you look at IPL, right? I mean, Chennai Super Kings, MS Dhoni. MS Dhoni comes from North India, right? He's associated. Where is this coming from? We are believing in a narrative, isn't it? So I think sports is a very good way in which you can actually understand narrative.
Okay. Next one. So one book everyone should read. I mean, when it comes to a narrative.
One book that everyone should read when it comes to narrative, the book that I haven't written yet.
Okay. Uh, the first narrative asset that maybe a startup should build.
Your own mind.
Great. Amazing. Yes. And the best proof a narrative is working.
Best proof a narrative is working is look at any powerful political leader.
Thanks for joining us. What you shared with us is really insightful. And if I have to share my takeaways, that's certainly the first one being that storytelling is not just marketing, it is also a strategic tool, a business lever for an organization. And the second one is that storytelling is what remains or what's the residue after your message. So I think these are the two key takeaways for me. And I'm sure our audience will also find lot of insightful takeaways from what you shared. So it's a wonderful narrative, a wonderful story. If some of our audience want to follow you, what's the way?
I think I create my own stories on Instagram. I'm known as the traveling professor on Instagram, and it's a growing community over there. If you're on TikTok, I'm the traveling professor on TikTok. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm the traveling professor on LinkedIn. So those are the three ways in which they can get in touch with me. And my company's name is Fable Lab, and Fable Lab is with me and Janavi, who's my co-founder. So you can say hello to me on LinkedIn, and we can take the conversation forward.
Thanks, Siddharth. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.